I'm realizing that money and power and influence, like that's everything to a lot of people. And once that starts to feel threatened, there's no limit to what people will do. Hello guys, good morning and welcome back to my channel. It's been a few months, but we are back and I am happy to be back filming. And I feel like this is gonna be a good video. Also, happy Black History Month. Gotta start this thing off right, period. But yeah, I recently watched the movie Malcolm X, and it was not on purpose. It was not because it's Black History Month. Honestly, it has been a movie that has been on my radar. I've been wanting to watch it for some time now, probably some years at this point. And I wanted to watch it because I never really knew the full story of Malcolm X. Of course, I knew who he was. I'd heard things over the years, growing up and all of that. But I never really knew the full story, and I wanted to know. Growing up in school, we learned about the Rosa Parks, the Martin Luther King Jr.'s. And you hear about Malcolm X, but when you hear about him, or when I heard about him, I just thought of him as like the complete opposite of Martin. This guy who believed in violence and, really acted on that. But I'm sure that was on purpose, right? Now that I know the story and, I, at least for the most part, understand it. I was gonna say fully understand, but I feel like there's more to it. I feel like movies don't always capture everything, so I won't say I fully know the story. But now that I know more about him, I do understand why he wasn't somebody who was highlighted in detail growing up. I think, Martin Luther King Jr., he, of course, his messaging was more palatable, at least, for the first part of his career, because I heard things got a little spicy closer to the time when he got assassinated. So in watching the movie though, and watching interviews and just like really kind of digging and learning more about him, I have an issue. Like, before we even get into the video, let me start here. I have an issue with the fact that growing up we learned about both of their movements, Malcolm and Martin's, as either violent or nonviolent movement. First of all, it places the idea of violence on these Black movements when really that's not what was happening. That's not who was being violent at the time. And I really take issue with that. I was watching the 1963 interview with Malcolm. I don't know who the white man was, but he was also being interviewed by a Black guy who seemed to lean more towards the non-violent, philosophy, way of thinking. And Malcolm was just talking about how, he was questioning. He's like, why are y'all referring to our movement as violent when we aren't lynching anybody? We aren't burning down any churches. We're not murdering children. Like, what do you mean violent? And I absolutely agree. So just thinking about the terms that were even used to describe the movements bothered me. If anything, I feel like Black people were just on the defense, you know what I mean? And I think that there were different, ideas of how that, self-defense should be enacted. So I just feel like there were better ways to describe what they were doing. There were better ways to describe the resistance. But what really sparked something in me, honestly, truly, was going to college at an HBCU. I remember going to class and literally I remember calling my best friend, and like every other class, I was like borderline in tears. And sometimes I was actually in tears because the history, like actually going into detail about some of the things that happened that I had absolutely never heard of, it was so jarring and it was so heavy. And I just knew that wasn't even the whole truth. Like sometimes back then I remember just feeling like I wish I could talk to these people about, their experiences and like what truly happened. Because we don't really know. Like we just know what was documented. And if it's anything worse, which I'm sure it was, if it's anything worse than what we saw in the recordings, what we see or what we read about, I just know that like that was such an unbearable time. And the heaviness of it all, it was just too much for me, girl. It was too much. I think I also was just, the tears were out of frustration of like what happened to my people and how hard they had to fight, but also the fact that I just did not know. And it just felt crazy to have gone through life and really be like, I guess, robbed of not knowing, or like just not being taught exactly what happened to us and the type of people that I come from, the type of fight that we were up against. Like that really, really, really bothered me. And the resilience of it all, my God, like it makes you feel like you came from some really resilient, strong, and powerful people. But the fact that they even had to experience it, it was just a lot for me. And I'm an empath, so baby, it don't take much as is. But yeah, I think that was the start for me, and it triggered me to just want to look more into history for myself, do my own readings, learn about Black history, but just, our history as a whole in the United States. I want to really talk about that from the lens of like Black womanhood. And so I'm like, what if I kind of centered my content around that? So I think that's the direction that we're going in. So just kind of, hang in there with me. So yeah, I want to start filming that research process and really getting into the things. So if that sounds like something that you're interested in, definitely give this video a thumbs up so we can go out some more people. Subscribe and let's get into some conversation. Okay, so let's get into it. So again, watching Malcolm X was not supposed to be the start of this. It just so happened to become that, because after watching it, and I'm a person who loves to learn. I'm a very curious person. And I'm always asking questions, always. And so again, I want to center my content around that. But after watching this movie, I was left with several questions that I felt compelled to dig into. And so again, let's get into it. I'm excited. All right, so Malcolm. He was separated from his parents, his family, after his dad was killed by white men and his mom was put into a mental health facility. And I believe him and all of his siblings had to go into foster care. So he had a really rough childhood. So then fast forward to his adult life, he's working a low-wage job. I believe he was working on a train for like tips. And then in addition to that, dealing with the social pressures, wanting to like straighten his hair, wanting to dress the part, looking like he had something, when he really didn't have two nickels to rub together. And then just overall not really having too much of a grip on his identity as a Black man. He was really just in survival mode, really no guidance, just kind of, just going through life, right? But then he comes across some guys that like introduce him to like gambling and the street life. I guess he wanted to be a gangster. Yeah, he gets into some trouble with them and then they end up trying to take his life. So he tries to retaliate amongst like committing other crimes. Fast forward, he gets arrested and goes to jail. And if I'm correct, I believe he spent about 6.5 years in prison, which, that is quite a while. So in prison, he meets this guy named Baines, right? And Baines is teaching him about the Islamic religion. He's teaching him about, just I guess how to be a righteous man, how to be an upstanding man, how to be an honorable man, how to organize against white power structures. He teaches him that, white men are the devil, these other Black nationalist ideologies, they believe in segregation. He teaches him how to love himself, like as a Black man, loving his skin, his hair. And he also teaches him to avoid conforming to social pressures like liquor, drugs, prostitution, and that money and power isn't the goal. It is liberation for our people. And that is the reason for the movement. That's all we care about. All right, so once Malcolm gets out of prison, he finally meets the man, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the man that is the second coming of Allah, right? The man that he has been praying to, writing letters to the entire time that he was in prison. I guess at that point, he's officially a part of the Nation of Islam, and he really starts to implement all of the things that he learned while in prison. But also, this is where things take a turn. Malcolm becomes very radical and pushing the movement forward in a way that had not been seen before. But, while he's pushing the movement forward, they're gaining more power, more money, more influence. I guess at some point, Malcolm just became too radical for the movement. They're like, hold on, buddy. We're connecting with these powerful, white men, and, we're starting to make progress and reach new heights, and you're doing too much. You messing up the bag, boo. So at this point, several things are happening. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad, which is the leader of, I guess, this sector of the Nation of Islam, or I don't know. Yeah, I would assume it was that specific sector. Malcolm finds out that he's not living what he is preaching. And so Elijah Muhammad, he's supposed to be this upstanding, the most honorable, the most righteous man. He's supposed to be all about uplifting the Black community and leading the movement, right? Everybody looks up to this man, and come to find out, he is going around creating broken homes. He's impregnating women and abandoning them, essentially. And sidebar, this part really pissed me off. Like, I had to pause and take a moment because I get so tired of men. Men are going to find any and every way, any excuse to spread their seed and to be able to have sex with multiple women. And I think I understand that, like, that's a part of like the Islamic religion. You can't have multiple wives, but the idea that, and wives though, right? Like, if you're going to do it, I guess make them your wife maybe. But like, I don't think the women that Malcolm went to go like question to see if those things were true, I don't think they were his wives. They were saying that he was not present at all in his children's lives, which essentially he was saying that, you know, he's the last coming of God and he needs to be able to spread his seed. That was his philosophy. And at the point that we're using religion to make you feel okay or give you the right to be sleeping with all of these different women. And once again, it's not like you're taking care of these women. It's not like they're put up and everything is dandy. You're not even in their lives. Like, that was just such a crazy thing. And I'm sure that was such a crazy realization for Malcolm. I'm sure that was a lot to take in. Malcolm had explicitly mentioned that he would have laid his life down for Elijah Muhammad because of the fact that he was the leader of a movement that was liberating Black people, or at least he felt like it was. And for the fact that his teachings had saved his life, essentially. In addition to that, you know, the people around him are becoming very jealous of the, I guess, publicity, the shine, the attention that Malcolm is starting to get. Even Baines, the man who taught him everything he knew while he was in prison, is starting to move a little funny. Apparently, Malcolm had a newsletter. Baines was in charge of it, and he was not reporting on anything that Malcolm was doing in the community. The Nation of Islam was getting paid. They were making money, and Malcolm wasn't getting any of it. Everybody else is sharing the wealth, cars, clothes, houses, all the things. Malcolm ain't seeing nothing, which his wife confronts him about because Malcolm was absolutely in denial or just pretending to be blind. And she was not having it. And that part made me so proud to be a Black woman, because I was just like, we gonna clock it every time. We are never gonna sit back and allow you to just be blind to all of the things that are happening around you. Like, I feel like Black women always do an amazing job of, you know, protecting Black men. We do a great job at a lot of different things, but especially protecting our Black men. And, you know, I do wish that energy was reciprocated, you know, but that's a whole nother conversation for another time. I'm almost certain that we'll tap into that at some point. And I really respected the fact that she confronted him about that. She was like, we never had an argument, but we're gonna have one today. We're gonna have one today because you see all of this happening around you and you're acting like it's not. And that's what we're not doing. If we're going to be the face of a movement, if we are going to be giving all of these people hope and being a representation of standing by your people, loving your people, uplifting your people, we're going to be a real representation of that. And like I said, I just really respected that. And this is the part that had me ready to throw my phone across the room. Malcolm goes to confront Baines about everything that's happening. He's like, what's good? What's tea? What's happening? Like, are we really gonna continue to support Elijah Muhammad knowing what he's doing? And Baines, the man that changed Malcolm's life in prison, the man who preached all of this righteousness and, you know, being honorable and fighting for our people. It's not about money, it's not about power, it's about liberating our people, pushing the movement forward, fighting against the system of oppression. This man responds to him and tells him, or asks him rather, like, what do you want? What's gonna make you shut up? Do you want a house? Do you want a car? Like, what, you want more money? What is it? And that part really blew me. I'm like, how could the man that converted so many men in prison and changed, I'm sure, so many men's lives, How could you be so down for the movement at one point, and now it's all about the power, it's all about the money, and now you're singing a different tune? How? Like, it really had me like, yo. And what I respect so much about Malcolm is the fact that he said absolute, ooh. And what I respect so much about Malcolm is that he was just like, absolutely the fuck not. Absolutely the fuck not. And he didn't fold. In fact, he became even more radical. He separated himself from the Nation of Islam, and what he stood for meant more than dollars. And you don't really find too many people who are cut like that. And so I just really respected that. And I think I really respected him because I know that is probably such a scary place to be, and the movie did such an amazing job of depicting that and showing how lonely and isolating it can feel to really stand behind your words and stand 10 toes down. And then the end of the movie just really tore me up, girl, really tore me up, because it's like, not only is the CIA working to try to take your life, right? But then, you know, you got them integrating with the Nation of Islam. They sending people to try and blow your shit up. Like, it's too much. It's too much happening. People are constantly calling and threatening to take your life, threatening to take your children's lives, your wife's life. Like, that is just that's too much. That's too much. And it's like, you have to be willing to sacrifice all of that for the advancement of your people. And I think that was the part of the movie that just really shook me. You almost have, if you want to organize in that way, organize in mass, you almost have to be willing to die about it. You have to, because there are going to be so many people, white people specifically, that are going to oppose your views, so much so that, you know, they're going to want to take your life. I'm realizing that money and power and influence, like, that's everything to a lot of people. And once that starts to feel threatened, there's no limit to what people will do. And you have to almost be willing to be a martyr. And it broke my heart when I heard him say that towards the end of the movie. He's like, I think it's time for a martyr. Like, not you just accepting that you're going to have to die about it. Like, baby, whoa, I had so many thoughts, so many thoughts. And I'm just going to read them off to you. Like, this, just by the end of the movie, and after seeing him be murdered mid-speech, I was like, oh no. And then, like, whenever I guess the Nation of Islam would like infiltrate his gatherings, you know, while he's like preaching and everything, they would keep yelling out, stay out of my pockets, get out of my pockets, or some shit like that. And I just was like, yo, is it this serious? Like, what happened to what y'all were standing for? But I'm gonna just read off some of the questions that I just had towards the end of the movie, and some of the things that I really want to start looking into and like doing research on. And I think this is gonna be like the start of like a power series for me. I'm thinking, I have the idea of like maybe doing a power series, and then after a certain point, maybe starting to like write some Substacks about it. I really want to start a Substack community, but we'll see. That's the idea for now. That's what I've been cooking up. All right, so let me go ahead and read some of the questions off. So the first question is, how could Baines become the very type of man that he condemned, or like, I guess, preached against almost? Honestly, and I've been wanting to do a video about this for so long, it reminds me so much of Kanye West. Like, Mr. Activist, I'm for the people, Kanye West. How could he become who he is today? How does power influence and change the psyche? How does power, money, and influence affect the psyche? Do even the people with the highest morale sell out once power and money are presented? How does money and power cause a man to betray his own people and an entire movement? If we're talking about just power in general, like, is a natural power structure inevitable? Like, can society exist without one? And that started to make me think about like socialism and all the things, which I'm not the most well versed on, but I plan on looking into it more for sure. And this kind of reminds me of the movie of the guy, I can't think of his name. Is it Fred Hammond, that was over the Black Panthers? I had a question that said, will the destruction of Black movements always come from within? Like, do we become too hungry for power and money and success to actually have a successful movement? Is money really the root of all evil? Is power really the root of all evil? But I feel like I answered my questions earlier. Like, when you are organizing in mass and really moving people, it's one thing to sit in front of a camera and just talk, right? But it's another thing to start to organize people and really get people in the streets. I feel like that's when things really get rough and people start wanting to take your life, and with the effort to maintain their power. It seems like people will do just about anything to maintain their power. So I feel like I've answered some of the things that I have been like, so I feel like I've answered some of the questions that I have been thinking about, but I know there's more to it and I really want to dig a little bit deeper. Power as it relates to, capitalism, power as it relates to, racism, and just all the things, because power extends so far and there's so many different intersections. So I really want to dive into that. But yeah, just back to the whole, like, you just have to be willing to die for it thing. It's like, when you really are trying to make a change, and I know things probably felt a lot worse back then, so they probably felt like they didn't have a choice. It does kind of come down to that. It's either, you're willing to die for it, because the alternative is submission. And if we all just submitted, there would never be any change, and our people would just suffer for years to come. And I commend, I respect the leaders of our community who have chosen to put their lives on the line for the progression of our people. And again, I can't wait to do the work. What does my guy say? What's his name? Dante Kyle? Yeah, him. Do the knowledge. I can't wait to do the knowledge. Okay, but that is all that I have for today. I'm praying that this video was not that long. I really expected, or I really planned on it being like a little cute 10-minute, 15-minute video, but knowing the way I get carried away, I just ain't no telling, child. But I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope this also sparked something in you too. I feel like there's no better time. It is Black History Month. So, if you're going to really get into the things, now is the time. It's never too late. So yeah, give this video a thumbs up. Let's talk below, subscribe, do all the things, and I will see you in the next diary entry.